Hi guys, Ross here, and welcome to the second part of this collaboration with TIMJ. If you haven't already watched the first part where he showed you how to create this abstract particle simulation in Houdini, then I would definitely recommend going and checking that out. But if you're here just for the Cinema 4D stuff, then we're going to bring in his simulation into Cinema 4D. We're going to create this interior scene, we're going to light it, texture it, and get it ready to render. So I'm going to stop waffling and let's get straight into Cinema 4D. Okay, let's go. Okay, so we're in Cinema 4D and I have set up this basic kind of interior scene. I'll run you guys through it just quickly before we kind of dive into the fun stuff, you know, the lighting, the texturing, and actually bring in Tim's asset he made in Houdini. So I'm just going to jump out the camera, and as you can see, nothing too crazy going on here. We just have this curtain on the left hand side, which I downloaded from Dimensiva, which is a great website for 3D assets. So you can go and grab that. It is the Arno 701 curtain. So if you want the exact one, there it is. And I just crushed it on the kind of X and Y, or not crushed it, but enlarged it actually. And then it's a bit shorter on the Z axis, so it didn't come out as far. And then we just have some basic walls which I set up. Originally I did it just with a bunch of different cubes with the archway booleaned out, but then I ended up modeling it as one solid object. So you can see if I go to quick shading, it's all joined together, and then I'm using this bevel deformer just to add some nice bevel to those corners, which is going to be really nice when the light hits it. It's going to pick up on those little details. The reason I did it as one geo or one object is so that we don't get any intersections and it actually kind of, you know, wraps around this corner like a normal wall would. And then I just extruded the top of that to create these caps. And then for the archway, that was done as a boolean, which then I just flattened down into a singular object. For the outside, it's just a cube with a bend deformer on it, so nothing fancy going on there. Then we have our floor, and then we have this kind of pedestal and this sphere, which we will ultimately replace with our kind of abstract form, which Tim has made. So why don't we actually start there? So I'm just going to delete those cameras quickly, don't need those. And let's go back to quick shading just to kind of free up the viewport, make it look a bit nicer. And yeah, like I said, let's bring in the asset he made. So I'm going to go to File and Merge, and then go to the folder where I saved his Alembic file. So here we go. And let's double click that. And I'm going to leave everything as the default preset. So that's going to bring it in as a particle geometry, render instances. It will set it to centimeters. I'm actually going to set it to meters because I know that Houdini works in meters. Otherwise, it's going to come in really, really small and then we'll have to scale it up. So it's just a simple step we can skip by setting it to meters. And then everything else, it will come in as the original animation with a frame rate of 30, and everything else looks good. We could enable other attributes. We could enable all these. I don't know exactly what Tim has exported from Houdini, but may as well enable all of it. And then if he has exported any of these color maps, etc., then they will be there as well. So let's hit OK on this. And I'm going to press this icon at the top to solo out this object. And let's play through the timeline, and hopefully we should see the particles. Now, there's some sort of flickering going on. I tested this a little bit before recording and couldn't seem to figure out what it was, but it seems that, you know, once it gets about 15-20 frames in, it plays perfectly and there's no issues. This is actually quite a low res version. He also supplied me with a really high res one, which is about 20 gigabytes in size. This is about 2. So my plan is to use this for the tutorial, and then when I do the final render, I will replace it with a high res version. But this is perfect for us to work with for now. So yeah, we have this lovely form which he's made, obviously built up of all these particles. But you'll see if I go to the Redshift render view and hit play, we can't see anything. So there's two ways to approach this. We could right click on our object and go to render tags, RS object, go to particles and change this from disabled to something like sphere instances. And that's going to instance spheres on all of the particles. We could then reduce the scale multiplier down to like 0.1. We could go smaller, kind of depending on how we want this to look. That looks pretty cool. And obviously this will look even better if we replace it with a high res mesh at the end. So that's one way to do it. But the only thing I've found, and I don't know if there's a way around this, and maybe someone would be able to tell me how to do this, I couldn't seem to get to the bottom of it, is when I move this around, the particles don't actually move, they stay in the same place, which obviously isn't ideal. And also now they've just disappeared again. Okay, I don't know yet. It's a bit buggy. I don't know exactly what's going on with cinema, but it seems to have an issue with particles for some reason. But anyway, it's here now. But yeah, like I said, for some reason doesn't move when I move the actual particle geometry itself. I've tried ticking a load of boxes and unchecking stuff and nothing seems to work. So the other option, which is the option we're going to look at now, is to use a cloner. So I'm going to delete that redshift object tag, and also let's hide the rest of the scene. I don't know why it randomly appeared. And let's go to MoGraph, cloner, and let's get a sphere and just drop that into the cloner. And let's make this really small. Let's go for like 5 centimeters, and let's turn the segments down to like 3. So they're super low poly. They're basically triangles at this point. And then let's go to the cloner and go to the object. And you would think that we need to drag in the thinking particles alembic. So let's drag that in. And if we hit play, we still can't see anything. So what we actually have to do instead is if we press Shift C to bring up our commander, let's try it again, Shift C, there we go. And we type in TP settings, we'll get this TP settings option. And we can double click this, and this will show all the particle groups within our scene. So what we can do now instead is select our cloner, drag this thinking particles group over into the cloner. And actually, before I do that, because I don't want this scene to crash, is I'm going to change the instance mode to multi-instance, so that will handle it a little bit better. And now if we drag that particles group into our cloner object, you can see now it's cloning those spheres onto our particles. So now we can see it within the Redshift render view. And now what we have is we have this behavior option, because you'll see even now, if I try to move this around, it still doesn't move. So, not great. But if we change it to standard TP, so standard thinking particles, we should now be able to move these particles around. Now, obviously we need this to get it into the scene in the right position. That's why I've decided to show you first. Also, for some reason now the spheres are absolutely massive. So let's see if I shrink these way down. Let's go with something like 0.1. And now we're kind of back to where we started. But now we have the ability to move those particles around. So that is amazing. As you can see, when we move the cloner, the original particles are still in place. So you could either create a null. So let's just create a null, drag the cloner into that, and then drag the particles in there as well. And then now you could move the null around and they'll both be in the same place. And that will just keep the viewport a bit tidier. Actually, no, I'm lying to you. That doesn't work at all. So let's undo all that. And let's see if we can go forward a frame. Okay. So the only issue at the moment is that we have this kind of duplicated effect where we've moved the cloner, and obviously the particles are still in the same place. For some reason, I've tried to add it to layers and hide it from layers. I've tried to hide it in the viewport and it still doesn't hide. So I'm not sure if this is an issue with 2024 or not, because I've seen videos of other people using them and hiding them. So I'm not sure if it's, maybe a bug with 2024, but yeah, they're gonna be in the way at the moment. They're gonna be visible in the viewport. So we're just gonna have to kind of get over that for now. But anyway, the particles are in here. If I just play them through, I'm going to hide the cloner real quick. There we go. Yeah, we have this lovely animation which Tim has wonderfully put together. Not as silky smooth as it is in Houdini, but we can't ask for everything. Maybe one day, but it's still amazing to be able to bring it in and render it in Cinema 4D. So let's actually start working on this scene. So let's unsolo everything. Let's show the rest of the scene again. And I'm going to have to press Control Shift Z to undo my camera because I've obviously accidentally moved it. So I'm just going to keep spamming Control Shift Z, and let's move this back into place. This is pretty intense with the particles. There we go. Come on, Control Shift Z, keep going, keep going. Okay, we're back in place. And actually, whilst we're here, let's lock this camera. So we'll just type in protection, go to rigging tags, protection, and that will lock that camera. Okay, so what I want to do is obviously move this cloner into the right position. So I'm going to middle mouse click and basically just line it up with where the sphere currently is. So let's move this cloner forward. Obviously, we're going to have to show the cloner again. Here we go. Let's move it forward. Get it into position and then move it up. And we might want to shrink it down as well whilst we're here. So yeah, this is very laggy. So what I'm thinking, we might have to hide the cloner and hide the thinking group particles for now. There we go. Let's move that so it's roughly in the middle, somewhere like that. And then let's go to, I think we can go to our thinking particles and we could change the overall scale. So we could go like 0.5, and that will obviously update the cloner as well. And yeah, now we have it kind of perfectly in the middle where the sphere was originally. So something like that looks good. And let's hide that sphere. So there we go, hide that. And yeah, now we have this cool particles. I really wish we could hide the original particles. I don't know why it's not working, but yeah, that's going to be a little bit annoying, but it is what it is. I guess the only thing we could do is we could override object for rendering. Let's see. Okay, so it seems like the easiest way for now is just to disable it in the basic tab of the particle group. So we'll just disable it and we'll just leave it hidden for now and we can show it later on. So let's just re-show that sphere. Okay, so let's actually dive into lighting this scene. So I'm going to start off with just a basic HDR to get, some base shadows and just base kind of like diffuse lighting in here. The way I like to do these scenes is kind of using the HDR as like a base layer, and then we can use area lights to kind of paint in detail where we want it. So let's get a dome light. Let's drop this into lights. And I actually haven't really tested this beforehand, so we're going to freestyle it and hopefully find something we're happy with. So a set of HDRs which I really like is from PG Skies. It's a really great website for HDRs, and they have them named by the time of day they were taken. So you can kind of figure out what type of vibe you want to go for and then kind of find an appropriate HDR. So maybe we'll go for like a morning one, so like a dawn. So let's try 956, and you have backplates with them as well, so that helps to give you an idea of the type of lighting. So this is quite like a cloudy lighting here with a little bit of sun. We can maybe go a little bit earlier. That's way cloudier, so that might give you like a very good kind of base layer for lighting. So let's load that in, and these are very high resolution, so they can take a little bit of time to render. So just give it a second to update. And also they are very overexposed. They've got a very wide gamut of light and exposure levels. So we can really drop this down and keep a lot of detail. And we can also, not that we would need to, but you can crank it up as well. So let's go like -4. Let's maybe like rotate this around, just kind of see how the lighting's looking. And also we may need to like adjust the scene as well to kind of get a look and feel that we're happy with. So let's kind of rotate this around. Maybe let's just see what kind of looks we can get. Something like this is quite nice. And also I need to subdivide everything. So I'm just going to put a redshift object tag on the null and just go to geometry override and enable tessellation. And there we go. We've got a weird bug going on with some of the geo. I don't think we actually need it on the walls. We just need it on the curtains. So let's put it on the curtains, and we also want it on the back wall. So let's control drag it on there, and also let's put it on the sphere and the plinth. There we go. Cool. So the rest is perfectly fine. All right, nice. Yeah, like I said, we kind of want to use this as a base layer. So maybe we want a bit more of an overcast HDR. So let's go back through them. I mean, this one looks pretty overcast, but it's not really giving us that result. So I don't know, let's try 0743, see how this looks. This is actually quite cool. It's quite moody. Something like that. Let's try adding some area lights. This is going to be a lot of back and forth until we kind of get a look and feel that we like. So I'm just locking the render view. I'm going to get a redshift light area light. Let's bring this in. and put one here. And this is quite cool. It's almost illuminating from behind it, so it's a bit backlit, and that adds like a nice kind of silhouette effect. We can scale this up. That's going to give like a much softer finish. And this is where you might want to adjust your scene kind of outside of the camera. So for example here, I almost want to block this off so that the light isn't spilling out towards the front. So I might just add a cube here. I'm going to move it off screen like here and just scale that up like this. And there we go, just do something like that. There we go. And now it's kind of blocked off that front portion, which is quite nice. So we have this kind of backlight here. This is obviously way too bright. So let's put the intensity down to something like 10. That's a lot nicer. And then I'm going to control and drag this and move this to the front. And I want to turn the spread down on this because I almost want it to like fade to dark at the front and be it much more focused kind of in this middle area here. So I might put it to like 0.3 or something. Maybe we can go like 0.2, 0.1. Let's see. Let's try that. And then move it up. And this is feeling a lot nicer. And then there we go, something like this. So now we're getting a much harsher finish here, and it's drawing a lot more attention to the front of our composition. And we could turn down the intensity of this as well. So let's go like -2. And also I think we could turn the spread back up. So maybe like 0.2 as well. And maybe move it closer still, and then rotate it down a bit more. Like that. I think something like that is quite nice. And yeah, I think then we just need to adjust the HDR because obviously that warm lighting is throwing us off a little bit. So maybe we kind of match the lighting we're getting from the rest of our scene. So I like to do this when I'm using a mixture of area lights and HDR lights. Is if the HDR does have quite directional lighting like this, let's try and match it so it's kind of in a similar direction to how the area lights are facing. So for example, this light at the back that's obviously quite low and casting straight onto the wall, let's try and match that with the dome light. So maybe we need to go a bit further up like this. And let's also turn this way down. So let's go like -7. And also I'm going to take some of the saturation out, so maybe like 25%. And let's turn the other area light back on. So it's adding a very subtle amount of fill. We could maybe go like -6, something like that. So it's just going to prevent it from being completely pitch black in the shadows. We're getting more of that kind of silhouette from the dome light there, which is quite nice, and a bit of warmth as well, which is contrasting with these very neutral area lights. Let's jump out the camera and let's let's play with this area light back here. Maybe we can turn the spread down to like 0.5 and see how that changes things. Let's turn that dome light off for now. And let's just play with kind of the angle on this. So maybe pointing it closer towards the floor so that it's not shining on this wall as much. Something like that. I think it's quite nice. And also because we've moved it up, it's cutting off where the archway is, so we're getting kind of that archway silhouette on this top wall here. I think we could push it a bit further back, like here, so we have a bit more of a gradation here instead of that kind of harsh line we were getting. So something like this, and also it's going to project onto this back wall here, which I think gives a slightly nicer look. Something like that. And I'm tempted to also play with a gobo on this area light here. So maybe we can find a gobo from Grayscale Gorilla. They have some amazing ones. So something like a plant gobo, like these tree ones they have, which are really good. So we could plug that in. And it's not going to make too much difference because we have a spread of 0.2, but if we went something like 0, you can see obviously the effect that has. And we could scale this up. And maybe now we could go, let's see, 0.1, 0.2. and just rotate it around. Let's test some different angles. So it's just going to help to add a little bit more detail. You can see we have a nice kind of bit of variation on this back wall here where that tree silhouette is, which is quite nice. Let's also try just like rotating this around, so maybe it hits it more from the front like this. See how that looks. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm just kind of playing at this point, so maybe we disable both of those. Let's try see what it looks like top down like this, maybe. And also what we could try is, you know, adding a translucent material to the curtain and shining the light through the curtain. So let's quickly make a material and drag this onto our curtain. We'll go to the node editor and I'll just scroll to the bottom, change this to thin walled, which will allow us to use subsurface as a translucency slider instead of subsurface scattering. And if I set that to 1, you can see now we have this kind of translucent curtain. So now we have this really nice light coming through the left-hand side. So it might actually be quite interesting to have this light source shining through here, which is giving us a very diffused lighting effect. We could, first of all, turn the translucency up. Oh, it's already as up as it can be. But we could add a little bit of transmission, so maybe like 0.2, maybe like 0.5. And that's just going to let a little bit more light through. And we get some really nice shadows actually coming off the curtain, which is quite interesting. And we could turn that translucency down. So this would be kind of just striking a balance of the look and feel we want out of these curtains. So something like that. And yeah, now we have like a really interesting look to our object and to our scene. So we could turn up that light now, probably go like 0 exposure. And actually, I really like this look and feel. So let's scale the light down, maybe move it a bit closer. And actually, now let's keep it as it was. And I think it actually works with the gobo because that is adding some slight variation. So now we have that light from the left, which is quite dramatic. It's obviously illuminating the curtains. I would want to come back and refine this because obviously this is super overexposed. But let's keep that as is for now. And let's add that right light at the back in. So now we have this kind of light from the left, light from the right. This feels a lot more dramatic. And I think we could play with this so that maybe it's not as bright on this archway here, just so that, you know, we have like a main key area here. We have a slightly filled area here, but this area is kind of a little bit distracting because it's almost as bright as the light which is hitting the sphere. So let's rotate this down so we get something like that. And then also just like tone it down in general. So maybe like -1. Let's move it maybe forward a little bit. Turn the spread up to like 0.5 so it's a little bit softer. And I think something like that works pretty well. So I think the next thing would be to add some lighting to the back wall. So let's just control drag this area light. And let's see what would be a nice way for this to catch this. So let's kind of move it. Maybe it's shining down like this, or maybe it is quite low down here and it's pointing towards the wall there. Like that. I think that's quite nice. We can obviously move this up so it's not hitting the floor as much. Something like that. And again, I would probably turn down the exposure a little bit just so it's not distracting from our key object in the foreground. So maybe we go like -2. And also just turn the spread down so it's a little bit harsher where it hits. Adds a bit more contrast. There we have maybe like 0.4. So those are the main key lights. And then we could turn on our dome light again. And let's just test a few dome lights. So I think maybe we go for an even earlier one. Let's see, 0720. See how this looks. Let's turn the exposure all the way up. Let's turn the saturation all the way up and rotate this around. I'm just going to 0 out the coordinates. And this actually gives some really interesting looks. Let's actually just turn all the area lights off quickly. and see what type of results we can get from this. It's actually quite nice with this really warm tone that's shining through the curtains. And also the curtains are kind of like casting onto the sphere, which is pretty nice. How does that look with the area lights? And then let's turn the exposure down maybe. This actually looks quite cool, how we've got like these very neutral area lights and then like a nice bit of like warm kind of rim lighting coming from the HDR. So I actually quite like that. So maybe we can keep that for now. Obviously we could finesse it with the texturing, but I think that looks pretty cool. I think maybe if we rotate it back a little bit so these shadows still stay quite cool. We just have a bit of rim lighting on this archway here and a bit on the sphere. Something like that. And yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. I think for the area light at the front, so this, let's just rename it key light. We could add a bit of warmth. So let's change the mode from color to color and temperature. And we could set it to like, maybe not 5,500, but maybe like 6,000 Kelvins. That's just going to add a little bit of warmth, which will take a little bit of the edge off. And I think maybe do the same with all the others. So let's set those to temperature, 6,000. And I think that would just blend a little bit nicer with the HDR we have, which is obviously quite warm. So that's good. The next thing we can add is obviously a background. Now Redshift has this lovely background option now, so we could enable this. And thankfully, obviously, these PG skies come with backplates, so we could find something which we think will work well. Maybe this one here. Drop it in and just see how it looks. And we might have to just change the offset. So let's something like this maybe. Let's change it to stretch. We can change the X exposure so we get something like that. I don't know, I kind of want something which is maybe a bit warmer, so maybe we need to actually just find a different one. These backplates are really nice from 0650, so let's try this one. This has a lot of like warmth in the sky. It will add a lot more drama to the scene. Something like this. And it kind of blends in with the warmth we have in the scene as well. So this works pretty well. I'd actually be tempted to see what the HDR look like for this, because then it might blend even better. So let's just control drag the dome light and we'll change that one to the 650 one, which enable that. And we'll rotate it around and see how it looks. So let's just disable everything. This is quite a dark HDR, so probably want to set the exposure to 0 and just rotate this around. And yeah, this is super dark. So maybe we need to crank this right up. And yeah, we kind of get this pinkish. This is a very soft HDR. So let's just turn all the area lights back on. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think. I mean, it is adding that warmth. It is adding that base layer that I talked about. And it blends quite well with the background, but still feels a bit weird. I think it's the background that feels a bit weird. It's a bit too dramatic for this scene. So maybe we just go for one of these ones, which is a bit more kind of just toned down, a bit more like magenta-y. So let's try this one. Give it a second to update. Yeah, I think that actually works a little bit better. Something like that. Maybe let's try maybe this one. It's getting a bit more of those orangey tones, but it's kind of like a nice in between. Okay, that's quite nice. Yeah, I think this works really well. We can just lower this down. Okay, we'll keep that for now. I think that's good. And I think this HDR works quite nicely. It's adding fill light across the whole scene. It's giving this kind of like pinkish, magenta-ish color, which obviously we're getting from this background here. And yeah, I'm happy with this. So let's start to actually texture this thing up. So I'm going to bring the cloner back in, the fluid. So let's just go to basic and enable this. And let's hide the sphere. And I think we're getting that issue where it's not appearing. So let's scrub through a couple frames and see if we can get it to a play ball. Let's have a look. We might have to actually play from the beginning. That seems to be a reoccurring thing. There we go. That's looking pretty cool. Just let it play out a little bit. Let's go frame 50, something like that. Cool. Now we have something. All right, this is looking really cool, actually. So yeah, let's start to texture this up. So I'm going to make a new material. First of all, I'm just going to rename this. So curtain, let's make a new material. And let's drag this onto our cloner. And let's refresh because obviously it's bugged out the curtain material. There we go. And I think we may need to adjust the scaling of some things here because this kind of feels like it's getting a little bit lost. So I'm actually going to increase the size. Let's put it back up to its original size. And I think we might have to move the cloner. So let's let that load and let's move this up. Like so. Yeah, now we have something like this. This might be too big now, but we'll play it and see how it looks. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna scale it back down a little bit. Let's go 0.75. Just so it kind of stays in. There we go. And also I think I want to move it. Let's see. Forward a little bit. There we go, like that. All right, let's play that. And also I think I might add a little bit of depth of field just to keep it in focus a little bit. So let's go to our camera, optical, enable bokeh, and we'll just set the cloner as the focus object. And we'll turn this bokeh down. So like maybe like 2, 1 maybe, 0.1. Okay, that's too much. Let's go like 2 or like 4.8 or something. Just add a bit of blurriness. And I think we might have to fix a few things here and there, but yeah, this is good for now. So I don't know, what kind of material do we want to make? I think like quite a dark material, and then maybe we make it like super reflective. And I don't know why it's done that. I think because I just accidentally deleted the camera. Okay, there we go. So let's maybe turn this up so it becomes super reflective, something like this. Turn down that roughness so it's like super glossy, and I kind of want to take all the color out right now, so I might just go to the saturation of the HDR and turn that all the way down. A bit more contrast, and I'm going to disable the background for now as well because it's all a little bit distracting. There we go, nice. Okay, cool. Let's actually texture the rest of the scene and then we can come back to this object just because it's going to be quite dependent on the rest of the scene, I think. So let's just go to our particles and let's see, basic, disable. There we go. Yeah, let's start to texture this. So let's make a new material. We'll do the floor first. And I kind of want like a concrete-y texture. So I'm going to just find something along those lines. So let's go to assets, 3D, textures, and see what we have hiding in here. Let's go to, let's see, what do I have in ambient CG? Something like that. Not the moon, that's not what I want. Miscellaneous, surface imperfections, and I think I have like a, let's see, maybe like a smudges one would just work quite well. Metal, nope. Metal aluminium, nope. Smudges swirl. Let's try smudges and just see how it looks across the floor. Obviously scale this way down, so let's try like a scale of 10. Something like that maybe. And let's unsolo it and see what kind of result we get. And I think we need to plug this into a ramp. So let's plug that into a ramp. Alt input and plug that into roughness. And we need to change this from smooth to linear. And let's just lift that black value to like something like 30. That'll add a bit more roughness. Maybe we can go for something like 50. There we go. And let's just change the overall color to something like, I don't know, like that. And maybe we can go for like a nice bit of a warmer color, like a 95%, kind of like pastel pink type thing. And I think we could just dial in a bit more contrast in that roughness. So let's maybe bring that ramp in a little bit on both ends, just to kind of make that contrast a bit higher. And then have a look at this and maybe lower that roughness a little bit. Let's go like 25. I used to have a really good texture from Grayscale Gorillas, but for some reason I can't renew my license. Do I still have it? It's one of their dust ones and it works really well for kind of nice floors. Yeah, one of these would probably work a lot better. Yeah, let's try something like this. Let's put one of these dust ones in here. And maybe we mix the two. So we could get a color mix. And first of all, let's obviously set this to the right scale. So again, let's try 10. Something like that. That looks a lot nicer. Plug that into input 1. Plug this one into input 2. And then maybe like blend the two. So we'll set it to like 0.5. Now we kind of get a mix of both. And I think maybe we need to rotate one of them. So let's rotate this 145 degrees. So the tiling isn't kind of going in the same direction as the Grayscale Gorilla one. So now we kind of get some crossover like this. And then let's plug that into the roughness. And yeah, we get something like this, which feels a lot nicer. Let's maybe change this to like a bit of an orangey color. Let's try something like 25, maybe a bit more saturation. Yeah, that looks good. It's pretty dark. The scene's pretty dark, so we might have to just bump up the brightness a little bit, but we'll come to that. Let's then make another material. So this is going to be the floor. This could be for the walls, so let's drop that onto walls, and we'll also do the same for the caps as well. So let's call that walls. Let's kind of start off with how we want the color to look. So let's maybe set it quite bright, and instead of like an orangey, yeah, let's go for like a pinkish kind of color. So maybe like 350, and we'll make it quite desaturated. Let's go something like 15. That looks quite nice. And I think we should apply that to the back wall as well. So let's just drop that onto the back wall wherever I've saved it. There it is. There we go. Now we get something like that. And also now we can see that reflection. So let's turn that roughness all the way up, 0.5. And now let's just find something to kind of break up the texture on there. So let's go to textures and let's go for crust. Let's see what crust looks like. So one of these might work quite well for the wall. Something with not too much contrast, maybe like 15 or 16. 40 might actually work even better. Yeah, let's go for 40. So let's drag that in, solo this out. And obviously, you know, I modeled this and it's not modeled to perfection, as you can see. So the UVs are all over the place. So let's drop down a triplanar node and we'll connect that image X. And I like to use a abs node. And by the way, I'm double clicking to bring up this menu, or you can press C and it brings it up as well. But I like to use this abs node and plug that into scale. And now we can just easily do it with this one slider here. So let's solo this triplanar. And I think we need to turn the scale way down. So let's try 1. Okay. That's not working. Let's try, there we go, 0.001. So now we get something like this. Yeah, I think 0.0005 works quite well. Let's plug that into roughness. And yeah, I think we can ramp this. So let's double click, get a ramp, plug that in. Let's change it from smooth to linear so it doesn't clamp it down. And then we'll just drag that in, that white value in, and then just lift that black value to like 30. There we go. So now we have something like that, which works pretty well, I would say. Cool, happy with that. I think we just need to work on those curtains. So let's go to the curtain object. And I think we can dial in some of that pink color into this. So let's turn up the brightness on that for starters. Let's try turn all the transmission off so we can focus purely on the translucency. And we can dial in some of that color into the translucency, and all of a sudden that completely changes the look and feel of the scene because it's adding a lot of warmth. We could go for, yeah, like something a bit more orange to match with the floor. Yeah, we could add loads of color into this. I'm going to save this because I don't know why I've got a feeling that it's going to crash. But yeah, let's turn the base color off and just focus purely on this translucency. We'll turn that all the way up. Maybe we turn down the brightness on that translucency, and you can see that area light is super bright because it's really hot in some areas there. So we need to potentially turn down that area light a little bit. So let's take a look at it. Maybe we need to turn the spread all the way up to 1 on that area light. There we go. That's going to be a lot softer, but also we're losing that contrast from the scene. So now we need to think, okay, do we need to change the vibe? Do we need to light it from this side again? Because it's making the curtain super overexposed and I don't really like the look of it. And go for something like this, which still gives us a really nice result. We go for something like that. That's quite nice. And we could also, I guess we could keep the light on the left-hand side. So we could duplicate this, move it over, and shine this through just to give a little bit of light from the left-hand side, but just maybe keep it very like soft and toned down. So we could turn the spread up on this key light all the way up to 1 to make it super soft. And that's just going to help to fill in that left-hand side a little bit as well. I think maybe just keep it lower down like this. Rotate it back. And yeah, just tone. Let's see, what does it look like now I've moved it way closer? Yeah, it's still super hot. So let's just turn down the exposure on that. There we go. So now we get something like this. So I think we can turn the base color back on. So that will add some of that warmth. We could tone that down, maybe turn that more orangey as well. And also just turn down maybe some of that translucency. So now we get much more of like a diffuse kind of feel to it, like we do now, which I think looks quite nice. And also now we could probably turn down the actual base color to a much darker color. So something like 50, and just put some more saturation into that. Like that. And also for a more like fabricy material, I would turn off reflection and I would use sheen instead, because that's more realistic to a fabricy material. You see we kind of get like a backlit reflection, so we really see it on the ripples of that curtain, and we could turn the roughness up, and that really helps to kind of create that silhouette effect, which is really nice. So yeah, that's come to life a lot already just by adding kind of those basic textures. We also obviously want to add something to the plinth. I'm tempted because this plinth is very thick and it's almost like distracting from the abstract form we have. So I might like shrink this down and just like sit this on the floor, but it's much more low key. So let's just set the axis point to the bottom, and then we can go to coordinates and set that to 0, maybe like 0.1, just so it's resting off the floor a little bit. And then I kind of want to take a version of the floor material, but maybe make it a bit grittier. So let's just control drag the floor material, drop that onto the base. And I don't know why it's not subdividing. Should be. I've got tessellation on it. Let's give it a refresh again. Okay, there we go. So yeah, let's take this color mix and let's get a ramp, and let's just like clamp down this roughness. So there's going to be areas where it's like super glossy and areas where it's super like matte. So let's just take this ramp again, change it from smooth to linear, and then let's just clamp down these values. Here we go, clamp those down. I don't like to go completely black because then you will get way too much contrast, but something like this will work much better. And I think we could actually maybe not make the texture as small. So let's maybe go for scale 5, There we go. And then same with the grayscale gorilla one. Maybe we go something like 4, 3 even, like that. I think that will look nicer. Same with the other one. Not 34. Let's try 3. There we go. So we get something like that. And it's kind of hard to tell. I think maybe we need to make the overall texture a little bit darker. So let's go for the color. Make it much darker and maybe take a bit of the saturation out of it. So there we go. Something like that. And I think that will show up. I mean, it's already kind of showing up now, but it will show up more when it renders a bit cleaner. But yeah, we're already starting to see some detail on the floor from the roughness. That sheen is showing up really nicely on the curtains. Same with the texture on the wall. Super subtle, but it will show up in the final render. And yeah, did I disable the bevel? No, we're good. Okay, cool. I think we might want to add just like a top light so we can like highlight these caps. So yeah, that could come from the dome light potentially. Maybe we need to play with that a little bit still. And let's also re-enable the backdrop. And I'm thinking maybe we actually, because at the moment we went for something like this, which now I don't think really works very well, but I'm thinking if we go for something like really bright, like a blue sky, it's going to contrast really nicely with this kind of like pink pastel tone we have. It's going to add like a really surreal finish to it. So let's see if we can find something in these back plates. Hopefully there's something in here. Even like a clear blue sky like this might work quite nicely. What about like 12 o'clock? There we go. Let's load this one in. Just see how it looks with a blue sky. And just lift. I think that's quite nice. I think we would now just have to lift the contrast in this scene. And also I think we could turn up the exposure of that. There we go, something like that. And maybe just find something with a few more clouds. So I have another pack somewhere in here. 3D textures, skies, Nikolai Becker. I think I got these off Gumroad. So yeah, these will work really well, I think. And let's change it from stretch to crop or to fit, maybe. I think that scale feels a bit more realistic. Let's just lower those down. Yeah, I think that's way nicer. So I think now we just need to lift up some of these shadows so it feels a bit more in keeping with that bright sky. So let's go to our scene and potentially just find a brighter HDR. So let's just enable this one we had. This is obviously the really kind of red warmish one. But we could, first of all, lift the exposure. And I think actually just completely change it. Let's go for PG Skies 12 o'clock. Yeah, it's like a midday one. So that should kind of give us the look and feel we want. Give it a second to update. And obviously turn this down. There we go. And yeah, I think if we just kind of rotate this to an angle where it's kind of acting, like I said, as a nice kind of base layer. So something like this, we're getting highlights on the top, and now we can re-enable everything else and turn this way down, like -7. There we go. Now we have like this really nice, soft, kind of dreamy lighting where it's filling in these dark shadows, and yeah, it's just helping to make everything match up. I think we could, yeah, just rotate it to an angle where it matches the area lights we have. So let's just kind of rotate this round. Yeah, it's a bit jarring because the area lights are so soft and this is quite a harsh HDR. Just zero everything out real quick. How does that look? Kind of works. Kind of does. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Yeah, that's nice because it's kind of lighting the front, which we needed to fill. So I think that works pretty well, actually. Yeah, we can turn up the exposure a little bit on that. And let's actually get our ink back in there and see how this all comes together. Still not 100% sure on the HDR just yet. We'll come back to it. And I think we'll have to do our playthrough so that it plays properly. There we go, let's have a look. Yeah, I think this looks pretty cool. I'm just thinking out loud. I wonder if we turn the sphere back on, obviously make it way bigger, and then have the ink inside the sphere. So let's maybe make this like 200 centimeters. And we could turn it into like a glass sphere with the ink floating around inside, you know? So let's just make sure this sphere is sitting on the base, first of all. So we'll just disable this quickly. There we go. And subdivide this. Let's move this here so we know it's definitely sitting there. And we could change this sphere to a hexahedron, so it's made of quads. That's a little bit nicer. And then yeah, just sit that on the floor like so. I think that's a little bit nicer. And then now we can just get our ink, re-enable, and probably have to play through the timeline until it sorts itself out. There we go. And let's just scale this down. So let's go to scale like 0.5 and then move this cloner obviously inside the sphere. So scale down, shift this down like that. Looks like it's in the middle to me. Here we go, move it over a little bit. Now we get something like that. And what we can do, because you'll see if I play this, obviously we're not going to see anything, but if I went and added a glass material onto the sphere, so let's add that on. So we'll just go to transmission and set it to like 1.3. Obviously turn the roughness down to like 0.1. We got a couple things first of all. First of all, we got this black area, which might be because we haven't built anything in the exterior of this scene. So let's go to our render settings quickly and go to advanced globals, refraction, turn that up to 8, and then increase the combined to 10. Okay, yeah, so I think it's because we haven't built anything outside the scene. So we might just have to build something real quick. We'll come back to that. But the other thing is it's not really behaving like glass, and that's because the sphere has no thickness. So if we go to sphere, and we press Shift C to bring up our commander and we type in thicken and we press Alt and double click the thicken, it will automatically make it a parent of the sphere. And now because it has thickness, it will act more like glass would. So now we have that thickness. We probably don't need 10 centimeters, but maybe something like 2 will feel a bit more realistic. And yeah, now we have something like this. We need to probably take that roughness down, and also now we want to change the IOR to something like 1.5, which is closer to IOR of glass, and we get something like this. I'm not gonna lie, I think I actually kind of preferred it without the thickness, because we got this cool effect where it was refracting the ink towards the outside of the glass. So you see if I turn the roughness down, it kind of, yeah, it's like refracting it to the outside, which I think looks really cool. If I turn it down to 1.3, you see that IOR changes dramatically. 1.52 gives you much more of that look and feel. We could change it to thin walled, which basically gives it more of like a plastic look and feel, because it's telling cinema there's no thickness, so you're not getting as much refraction. But I think it looks quite cool like this. I think we just need to add something in the foreground to fill in these black areas, and that'll look pretty cool. So maybe we could also turn up the dispersion, so maybe like 32, and then you get this really nice kind of dispersion effect. That looks pretty cool. And we can also go to advanced and turn on shadow opacity. So we could turn that to something like 1, which will then obviously cast a shadow of the sphere onto the scene, which will darken that sphere and kind of adds a bit more contrast. Again, looks pretty cool. We could maybe tone it down, maybe go like 0.5, I reckon, or 0.4, just so there's a bit of shadow, but yeah, it's not too crazy. So something like that works pretty well, I think. I'm also going to turn up the subdivisions on that sphere because it felt like it was quite elongated. I think that feels a bit more realistic. So yeah, I think the next thing we need to do is just build something outside of the scene. So let's just jump out the camera. And this is going to start to get quite heavy. So I'm going to pause the render view. And let's see, it's actually kind of refracting. It looks like it's refracting off the archway. I'm just going to build a wall basically above us. So let's just control drag the floor and T for scale this down. And let's just move this kind of above the curtain like this. Just so it's out the way of the camera, but it's hopefully bouncing some more color around. So let's have a look. Okay, I think the only thing it's done is it's added a reflection to the top of, yeah, it's added some shadows up here. But aside from that, not much. So where is, let's see, maybe we need to build a wall out here to the right. I'm just kind of curious where, oh, okay, I see. So obviously we have added this background in, but it's not being calculated in the refractions. So you can see, obviously it's black here, but it's showing up in the render. So let's press play and let's see if pre-composite, let's see if that changes anything. Nope. Post-composite and in render. Yeah, so you can see how without the background we have those black areas. So what we might have to do instead of using the background feature is create a plane. So let's just disable background because obviously that's not doing anything for us really. Let's create a plane. So we've got a plane plus Z and we want to find that texture that we used. So I believe it was 3D textures, skies, Nikolai Becker, sunny skies, and I think we just went for that first one. So let's make a new material and we'll drag that onto the plane. Double click that material and let's drag this texture in. Now what I want to find out is the dimensions of that sky so that when we make the plane it's to the same aspect ratio so it doesn't get stretched. So details 7952 by 5214. So 7952 by what was it? 5214? I think that's what it was if my memory serves me correctly. Yep, cool. So now the plane follows those same dimensions. And if I zoom out, this is super laggy with the particles. I can't imagine what it would be like when I use the final full res version, but I'm probably not going to attempt that in the tutorial. I'll just do that for the final render because I think it might crash my whole computer. But anyway, the plane is in. Let's connect that material to the emission color and we'll just disable all the other properties. So base, reflection, and we'll enable the weight to 1 on the emission. And then now that's upside down. So let's go to plane and change it to -Z. Hit play, and hopefully what we should see now is we have the backdrop, but we also have it in the reflections of our sphere. So there we go, perfect. So what we might just have to do is just rejig this around to kind of get back to where we originally were, which I can't quite remember. We could also scale this plane down. It doesn't need to be this big. So we can zoom that texture out. The only thing we gotta be careful, if we zoom out too much, it's not gonna be covering all the refractions. You can see it's started to go black already. So just gotta be careful about that. If we move it up, it should cover us a bit more. There we go. I think we can zoom out a little bit more. Come on, zoom, zoom, zoom. I think we were somewhere around here, weren't we, if I remember correctly? Let's zoom it up a little bit. Zoom it up, scale it up, you know what I mean? Cool. I think that looks good. I just want to offset that cloud so it fills that top right gap. There we go. Happy with that. So cool. I think I just want to maybe add a bit more of an interesting material to the ink. So let's maybe take that metallic texture off. And I'm trying to think of something cool we can do with the actual ink itself. So maybe we go for something that's kind of complementary to this scene. So maybe, I don't know, we could go for something like blue that will obviously match the sky. Or we go for something orange, a bit more reddish. That's quite cool, actually. And then we could make it like has a little bit of roughness. I mean, it's not really going to show up because the glass is doing a lot of the work. I think we need to add some reflection passes. So let's just maybe bump that up to like 6 and then combined to 12. Just make sure we're getting all the reflection possible. And obviously, another thing is because we're using a very low poly sphere to scatter these points, you know, we're going to miss some reflection. So maybe we just need to bump that sphere up to like 6 points. We'll just see how this handles. Let's go 10. So we actually have a bit more of a fuller sphere. And we're probably going to want to... let's keep... I was going to say let's set it to instance, but that's going to get super hefty. Let's keep it as is for now. Maybe let's see how high we can get away with before it starts kind of really starting to struggle. Because that will allow us to get a little bit more detail in that material. I think that looks cool. Maybe we can... Let's try put a max on noise across the ink. Just so we can get some like color variation. We're gonna have to set this to object and let's try increase the overall scale to like 100. I think it's cloning it on each of the spheres. So I'm thinking set it to world. There we go. The only issue is it's not gonna stick to the object. It's kind of gonna pass through, but that might actually look quite cool in this case because it's quite an abstract thing. But I was thinking just to add this max on noise so we get a bit of variation and we can then remap that noise through a ramp, solo that, and then, yeah, change this to like an orangey color on one, and then maybe the other is like a bit more reddish, something like that. Plug that into the base color. Just so we get a bit more variation. We could be a lot more dramatic with this. We could change it to like blue. So like one's blue, one's orange. And then you get something like that, which looks pretty funky, obviously. We could really clamp this down so it's a lot more dramatic. Maybe change the noise to something like turbulence. That'll break it up a lot more. And then you get something like this. I don't think the orange and blue necessarily works, so let's maybe go for like, yeah, like an orange and pink, maybe make it a bit more pastel. And I think we could also reduce the size of that sphere. Let's go 0.05, so those particles are smaller, maybe even smaller than that, 0.01, because the refraction from the glass is really like bouncing those around, scaling them around. Okay, that's obviously way too small. Let's try 0.1. Is that what it was on already? Maybe. Yeah. All right. 0.05. Let's give it a second to update. I don't think I gave it time to rest last time. There we go. I think that's a lot nicer. So yeah, that blue and orange works quite nicely actually. And we could, I don't know, add like a sheen to it so it kind of has like a backlit effect. Or maybe we just put a coat on it so that will add like an extra layer of reflection. I think that's quite cool. And then I think we'll just add a bit of detail to the actual sphere itself. So maybe there's areas that are a bit rougher and some areas which aren't. And then I think just to then finish things off, we'll adjust the lighting because I want it to be a bit darker behind the sphere so the focus is a lot more on the forefront. And I think that would just help to, you know, draw a lot more attention. So let's go to textures, miscellaneous. Actually, let's try the grayscale gorilla ones again. Textures, surface imperfections, smudges. Textures, let's see what we have. Something like that might work quite nicely. Yeah, let's just go for 04. Let's see how this looks. We'll solo this out. Give it a second to update. I think that'll work quite well. So let's just plug that into roughness. And actually, maybe we want to layer that with some scratches. Okay, so obviously we need to adjust that. So let's, first of all, actually, before we run it through a ramp, let's control drag that. And let's grab one of the scratches ones. So scratches, textures, and let's see what we have. Kind of want something which has scratches in multiple directions. That's quite intense. I want something that's quite subtle, to be honest. These are very dramatic. 43, that might work quite well, actually. Let's go 44. There we go. And what we'll do is we will run it through a color mix. So let's go color mix, input 1, input 2. First of all, let's solo both of them, make sure the scale is something we're happy with. So I think this is way too big. So let's put that down to like 2. There we go. And then the smudges, I don't know, I think we could maybe go larger with the smudges, like 0.5. There we go. And then we mix them. So I think we just introduce a little bit of the scratches, not too much. So maybe like 0.4, 0.3, something like that. And then this is still going to be way too rough. So now we just run it through this ramp, solo this, and again, change them both to linear. And we'll just drop this white value down to something like, I don't know, like 40. Might even want to go darker than that. Yeah, let's go literally like 20. And I think we can clamp these black values down so we get some really dark areas like that. And then, yeah, drop this even further, like 10. And maybe we can bring these up and bring that down. And I think we could leave it at that. So let's check. So yeah, we kind of get some areas that are quite rough and then some areas which are much smoother. So that's just going to help to break things up. So yeah, like I said, let's maybe just finish this off by adjusting the lighting, giving it one final look at, and then I think we'll be done. I'm wondering if we cap off the top because it's quite distracting with the sky up there as well. So I'm thinking we take this ceiling we built and let's just literally run it all the way to the end here. Let's try to get this into the right position. There we go. Move that back a little bit. Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a little bit less distracting now. And now let's just kind of go through the lighting one more time and have a look. So let's go one by one. So key light shining through the curtain on the left hand side. That's fine. That's not doing anything too crazy. That works a treat. So we can just call this Al Fill. Let's look at the key light. And I think maybe just rotate it a bit more forward and maybe just bring it back so it kind of covers a little bit more of the wall. I think that's quite nice. Oh, you can see it in the reflection how we have the gobo on, which is a little bit annoying. Let's take the gobo off. There we go. Maybe we put like a, thinking how we can avoid that really. Let's try a dome light quickly. I know we've gone back and forth so many times with this lighting. Let's try this main dome light we had here. And just rotate this round. And I'm going to move this plane over to the left so it's not capping the light from the right hand side. I'm also going to test some different dome lights, I think. Something which is just a little bit softer. Let's try 1338. Because I want to give it that nice soft kind of dreamy feel. And let's zero out all the coordinates. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe we just need to keep this as like the base. Like base lighting still. Because they're all very harsh. Let's try like a, I don't know. I know I always go for these interior ones, which I wouldn't normally go for because we are doing an exterior scene. But I know these give very soft lighting. Okay, that works pretty well actually. You literally cannot go wrong with the Maxim ROS HDR, I swear. It's impossible. So I would just take the saturation out of this because it's a little bit jarring with the rest of the lighting we have going on. And I would just turn it down, so now it is acting as like a base layer, so it's not really giving us much directional lighting. So HDR fill, if I could type properly. There we go. And let's turn on that key light again. There we go. And this is very bright. If we go to clay, we can see that's quite a bright light. So let's -1. Turn the spread down. Let's see, move it forward so it kind of catches the front a little bit more. And rotate. Wow, that made a massive difference then. Let's scale it up. Okay, cinema is starting to really struggle now. And let's just turn that spread up to like 0.15, maybe 0.2. There we go. So that's filling that foreground really nicely. Set it to regular. And if we take off that HDR fill, yeah, it's not doing too much. It's just lifting those shadows ever so slightly. And I don't know, I'm tempted to turn that spread down. There we go. And then turn the intensity down. But then now it just feels quite dark. So let's turn on that light in the back. There we go. And I think we just want to turn that down to like -2. Just so we're adding some sort of light, but it's not distracting loads. And then also the same for the outside as well. -4. -3. There we go. So yeah, we have like a really bright kind of foreground, and then it gets kind of darker as it goes towards the back, which I think works pretty well. I think the only issue now is that it feels very dark within that sphere. So, which is obviously going to be affected by what's behind it, because if the backdrop is dark, then the refractions will be dark. So we could turn the HDR up like that a little bit. We could, yeah, maybe just brighten up the backdrop a little bit. Still want to keep it like -2.5, so there's a clear definition difference between the background and the sphere. And then, yeah, maybe just tone that down a little bit. But then that is also making the sphere very dark. It might also be because we added the shadow in the advanced settings. Let's have a look. Nah, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Not really. Okay, what about if I added some slight emission to the ink inside? It's not really making too much of a difference. Makes it a bit weird as well, actually. What if we added metalness back on again? Nah, it feels really weird again. I think a darker color makes that ink more apparent. So something like that, and then we go for like an orange, like 20, and then 50 on the hue, and then just knock that black back and boost that up so we get something like this, and then maybe this black area comes in a little bit. Something like that. And yeah, okay, cool. So I think what we could do just to kind of polish this off is just do some redshift post effects, add some kind of color corrections, and then see how this looks. So let's open the redshift post effects. I'm going to go to optical and enable tone mapping. I like to do this to basically clamp all the values and then allow us to add more contrast afterwards. So the tone mapping is going to clamp those highlights. You can see now we kind of lose a lot of that brightness. Let's just scale this up. There we go. So yeah, we lose a lot of those highlights, which kind of takes a lot of the contrast out. But now what we can do is we can go to our color controls and add in a bit of contrast here, something like this, and you can kind of see the difference. So we're getting that contrast, but also it's stopping those highlights from being overexposed, which I think feels a lot nicer. We're getting those like deeper black values as well, which is helping that kind of abstract ink form to shine through a bit there. So that's cool. We could enable bloom, which is going to be nice because obviously we have that super bright highlight there, so we can kind of blow that out a little bit. Maybe not go that crazy, maybe like 1 and then 4, something like that. And then I think turn the threshold up a little bit so it's not affecting the floor, it's just affecting that area there. I think we could turn that threshold up even more. Let's go like 30. There we go, that's better. We could do the same for streak as well, so we could add a little streak to that. Let's keep an intensity of like 2 maybe. And the tail we could, okay, maybe not that much. Let's go back down to 0.5. Sometimes they don't show up in the progressive render, but when you do the final render, they'll show up. What else? Okay, so that's good. You can crush the black values as well, which is quite useful for adding a little bit more contrast. I like to adjust the threshold so it kind of covers more of the darker areas, so that it's kind of just increasing the overall darkness instead of just very dark areas. So we could go like threshold like 0.6, for example, and then just put the black to like 0.1. So that is just going to add a little bit more contrast. Maybe like, there we go, 0.03, something like that. And now you can see the difference already. So that's helping to really just kind of give it that final polish. And then I might be tempted to just bump the exposure up slightly so that it doesn't feel as dark in those areas. And that's going to lift those black values up again as well, which is nice. You can see the before and after. It's very subtle, but it almost gives it more of like a filmic look, which is quite nice. And then we will add a LUT. So let's go to LUT, apply color management, and just flick through these and kind of see what it can do for our image. Probably be useful to do this on an image that isn't really grainy. So maybe we'll do a bucket render. I'm just a little bit scared that it's going to crash, but we'll give it a go. See how it looks. And actually, this is rendering really quick. And this actually looks really nice. Now we're doing a full res render. Okay, so we've done that. Now we can flick through the LUTs. So let's just have a little flick through, see what kind of look and feels we can get. Something where it's a bit more desaturated is quite nice. Keep going. That adds like a really nice kind of warm, like brownish tint to everything. And also looking at an image in black and white is super useful for kind of understanding where your eye is immediately drawn to without there being any color or texture distracting you. So for example, here we can see that we have like a fairly evenly lit scene. There isn't like a clear differentiator in terms of the light between the foreground and the background. Like this is nearly as bright as it is in the foreground. Sure, this is a little bit brighter, but it's not majorly different. We obviously have this clear band here where it's quite bright and it casts onto the curtain, onto the wall, and then we've tried to make it darker in the foreground, but we could probably go a little bit darker, even more on those backlights to just bring a bit more focus to the front. But yeah, it's always good to kind of check it in black and white and also check it in clay. That's another great way to look at it so that we can understand where our eye is being drawn to. Let's keep flicking through, seeing what we can find. Actually, I really like it in black and white. It adds like a really nice quality to it, especially with this kind of abstract form that we've got going on. I'm quite tempted to keep the floor like a color and then change the walls to like a white. Just because a lot of the floor is shown in this middle section here, whereas the walls kind of cover the top and the sides. And we could also change this wall here to be darker. And I think immediately that would help to draw more attention to the foreground. So maybe we'll test that in a second. Okay, all these at the bottom not really doing too much. So let's go back through. And I quite liked like one of these. Like it's brightening everything up. It's adding a bit more of like a greenish, brownish tint to it, but I think it's quite nice. And actually, because it's doing that, we could then potentially add a bit more contrast. So we could go into our color curves and actually add a curve here. So we could clamp that down, maybe boost those highlights. And then we could get away with actually maybe boosting the overall exposure. So we get something like this. And I think that looks really nice. So let's maybe just flick through a couple more in case there's any which really stand out to us. I think that's quite nice as well. It's quite a warm vintage feel. And I think I'm going to actually leave it on that one. And I just want to, like I said, take away the color from the walls. And I'm also going to hide the caps because it's a bit weird how we have the caps and then the ceiling. So let's hide the caps and then drop this ceiling down. So let's try zoom out and hopefully nothing falls apart. I'm always pressing Control S just to save, just in case. So yeah, let's drop this down. There we go. And let's just turn off the bucket render. And yeah, we'll go to the wall texture. So walls. And let's just take that color out of the walls. So put it maybe on like 1%. And maybe we can make them darker as well, like 74. There we go. And then we'll do the same. We'll apply actually we'll copy the floor texture and apply that to the ceiling. And this one will just, again, take the saturation out. So maybe set that to 1, turn it down. And I think we need to drop it a little bit because I think there's a bit of a gap. So let's put it to 487 centimeters, maybe 480. And what is going on here? Oh no, I just realized I'm affecting the wrong object. There we go. Let's let's try do it on the actual correct object. So 1020, let's try 1019. There we go. Okay, so this is ceiling. And I think the ceiling's fine. I think we could go to this wall at the back, which again is, let's control drag that so we have a separate material for that back wall. Let's just rename that back. And we'll just make that darker still. So maybe put that down to like 50. There we go. I think that immediately helps to bring more focus to the foreground. And we could also get the light for the back and just turn that light down a little bit. So maybe like -3 exposure, maybe -3.5. There we go. That works a lot better already. And then let's take the other area like inside, which is to the right, and maybe set that to like -2. Now we get something like that. I think that back wall we could brighten back up because it is quite dark on the right hand side. So we'll just lift that a little bit. And I think that just helps to draw a bit more attention to the foreground. I kind of want to, for the ink, I'm calling it ink. I don't really know exactly the correct terminology that Tim wants to use, but I'm going to call it like some abstract ink form. I kind of want it to be a little bit brighter. Maybe we get rid of that black value and just inject a little bit more color and maybe make it something that's going to stand out a lot more. So I don't know, what do we think? Like a light blue maybe? Could almost sample it from the sky up here, but I don't think that's going to work. Don't know, I think that works pretty well actually in that blue form. Make it like a bluish purple, that's quite cool. There we go, 197. So we'll look, what about green? Just going through the motion now. Green stands out loads. Like, it really does. That's quite nice. That actually blends in pretty well with yellow. Okay, maybe that's what we needed all this time. So we'll just maybe bring that back, bring the orange in. Just create a bit more contrast like that. Yeah, that works really well, actually, in my opinion. So let's I'm getting quite nitpicky now, but maybe add a bit more translucency to the curtains. There we go, like 0.7, and just lift up that to like 80. There we go. And maybe we just turn down our key light ever so slightly to like minus 2.2. And what happens if we put there we go, put it to a cooler color, because we have a lot of area lights here with a very warm tone. So I think we can make them a bit more neutral. And what happens if we put the saturation back into... Okay, that's quite nice when we put the saturation back into our HDR, because we get this really kind of cool tone in the background, which again is helping to create that contrast between the background and the foreground. Maybe we go something like 50 or maybe like 75. I think that works quite nicely. Let's do a bucket render. Now I'm seeing it a bit clearer. I think instead of going for orange, maybe let's go for more of like the greeny shade of things. And solo things out. I think we can just clamp that yellow in a bit more. And let's do a bucket render. And then I think we'll be getting somewhere very, very close. Of course, we can always do post-production on this as well. I like to add a little bit of grain in my final render, so that might be worth taking a look at as well. But yeah, this is looking really nice. Let's just do a final look at the LUTs, because that is kind of adding a lot of warmth to the shot. So let's just do a final flick through. This one's quite nice. This takes like a lot of the kind of saturation out, but I quite like it. Feels a lot more like pastel, which is quite nice. And then we could bump up the saturation here in the optical, so we get something like this. And I think we could lift up those shadows ever so slightly, or at least bump up the exposure to something like that. Maybe contrast go 0.15, something like that. So you can see without post effects and with, you know, completely different look and feel, which is super nice. And I think I'm gonna leave it there, guys. So I'm gonna do a final render of this. So let's go to render settings, save, disable multipass, we don't need that. Let's go 16-bit, and I will double the size of this just for the final render purposes. And I'll drop it in this render folder, and I'll just put $PRJ so it saves as the project name. And we'll hit render. So let's render this out, see how long it's going to take. It shouldn't take too long. There's nothing too crazy going on. And because I'm doing it high res, I may then notice some little details that I want to finesse after the fact. But I think everything is pretty good to go. So I'm going to cut to an outro here and wrap this bad boy up. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully you found it useful and there were some tips and tricks and techniques packed into the video that you can apply to your own work. Like I said, this was a collaboration with TIMJ Design, so I just want to say a massive thank you to Tim for being open to collaborating with me on this video. He has his own Patreon, so definitely go and check it out if you're interested in learning more about Houdini. He is the go-to man for this type of stuff. Let me know what you thought about this in the comment section down below. So I just want to say thank you again for watching the video. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, Peace.